That passage is part of a series of words in John 17 that make up Jesus' high priestly prayer. So it's a pretty significant prayer, and it touches on a lot of very significant subjects, almost like the way water runs through a stream and there's eddies. There's these moments of poetic language around a topic, and then it moves on to another one and flows around that and then moves on. And we're just going to pick up on one of those important eddies this morning. Let's pray. Lord, as we hear these words of Jesus' prayer, help us to understand what you want to say to us this morning, that we might respond to your Spirit to the glory of your name. Amen. So in the section that we looked at, or that Mary read for us, the first thing Jesus says is, I've made you manifest, Father. I've made God known, or the name of God. I think the actual text says, I've manifest God's name. This is a revealing of the nature of God. And Jesus is claiming that he has revealed the true nature of God. God's authority and character and the nature of his power. When we speak about the name of someone, we're talking about the totality of who they are. Remember that old saying, open in the name of the King, when you came in the authority of somebody and you used their name to represent the fact that they were there. So this is Jesus saying, I have revealed the true name, the true nature of who God is. And of course, when we refer to God, we're referring to those things that we believe to be ultimately true. True beyond the things that we can see and touch, in a way. It's a level of truth that resides in eternity beyond the changeable culture and changeable things of this world. They're ultimate truths. The way we name and represent God is very important. It talks about that level or that scale or that depth or that breadth of reality. It's important both to us and to others. And Jesus is saying he has made God known. And it was not entirely consistent with the ways people thought God was like. You might remember that Jesus came up against the authorities again and again when he healed on the Sabbath or when he taught certain things, and the Pharisees, those who were the religious teachers at the time, got a bit rankled by the way Jesus did it. But the disciples came to believe that the way Jesus represented God was true. Not everyone else did, but Jesus is saying they've come to a point of conviction. They're trusting the way I've represented God is the true nature of God. So there's a bit of a confrontation between established culture and the way Jesus demonstrated and enacted what God's nature was truly like. And the disciples chose Jesus' representation. But Jesus says these are people who have kept the word. His disciples are people who have kept the word. And you might think that kept the word means being obedient to it, or you might think keeping the word means you've got a little box somewhere where you put it in and keep it safe. It's somewhere containing both of those things is the idea here. See, these are people who have kept the traditions of the people of God in their life. They haven't simply tucked them away in a box, and they haven't just kept a whole bunch of rules. They're people who have lived the traditions. So they've celebrated the festivals. They've broken the unleavened bread at Passover time. They've built makeshift booths at Sukkot. They have blown the shofar at Yom Kippur. They've lit the candles at Hanukkah. Their lives have told the story of the Hebrew people. They've enacted it. It's a marvellous thing, culture. It holds you in a way that tells you who you are. The rhythm of community life has formed them and reminded them of the key moments in the development of their identity as the people of God. They've kept the word. It's a little bit like some people these days use Anzac. Have you noticed that in Australia? The Anzac tradition is on the rise. You only have to be attending the service we have down at Pyrmont to see this. And it's become such an important and seemingly formative moment in the history of our, certainly European settled nation. And we remember and mark it with ceremonies and marches and so forth. And more Australians are using Anzac as a source of their identity. And they want to appeal to the best things about that tradition and say, yeah, we're one of them. We stand in that tradition. And in a very real way, and probably even more so with the people of Israel, they had a number of festivals and celebrations and meals and things that reminded them what the tradition was that they stood in, and they kept that. These are the stories that form the identities of the people, and they kept the stories alive. Jesus comes along and ever so slightly, but oh so meaningfully, tweaks the meaning of that story that they knew so well. Rather than it simply being about the tribe one is born into, Jesus begins to make it clear that it's what you accept as the ultimate reality that really counts. That's what this talk of faith is about. Faith is about what you believe is ultimately true. Jesus enacted and demonstrated that it's not having blood sacrifices and being part of a tribe and so forth that really makes you part of the people of God. Instead, it's where you put your trust. And Jesus said, put your trust in me, personally. That's what makes you part of the people of God. To follow him and the way he does life is the way we express that trust. So it's a slight tweaking of things. And these people get converted to a new way of seeing. They've come out of a culture where they've understood it one way, and they're starting to see it a new way. Now, the funny thing about conversion is something really, really important has to shift for us. Often we have a sense of conversion being like we've suddenly seen something that we've never really paid attention to before. And our eye is drawn towards this thing, maybe the event that happened some 2,000 years ago, an event that changed the course of history. We see the cross and we see Jesus on the cross and we hear the story of his resurrection, and we come to believe that Jesus' death and resurrection is central to absolutely everything. And I believe that's true. But really that's the start, not the totality of conversion. Because in reality, conversion is not just seeing something new, it's a new way of seeing everything. Conversion is a new way of seeing everything that makes everything we see new in a funny kind of way. It changes what is important to us. It changes what our eye chooses to focus on, what parts of the detail we pick up, how deeply we see, and things like that. I mean, what do you assume to be important in life? What's your working assumptions about what are the most important things in life? A stable job? A good career perhaps? Maybe even a mortgage if you're that lucky or unlucky? If you've got time and enough money, perhaps you'll get a partner and maybe even children. Are those things important? They are to some people. These are the things our culture would claim are the stuff of life. But plenty of people tick all those boxes and yet still wonder what life is about. So it can't actually be found in those particular things, because it's not in what you have, it is in how you see. It's in how you see everything, and Jesus invites us to see as he sees. Most Fridays I drop my girls off to school, and because their school is in a particular part of the world which is near the nursing home where one of our members who used to come here and live on the streets is now living in that nursing home. So I usually pop in there and spend half an hour or so talking and praying with Juliet. Now, Juliet has spent most of her life living on the streets, and she's an older woman now, so that's a long time. And she didn't have a very easy upbringing, and she found living inside four walls just too stressful for her. And now she's living inside four walls. And it's not easy for her. Now, the place where she is, fortunately, they have chickens. She loves to go out and feed the chickens. And she'll always let me know how they're getting on, and they're looking pretty healthy, I've got to tell you. So it's all going well that side. But for the rest of the time, she's mostly sitting in a room. It's a nice room. And she's got a colour TV and a bed and a table and plenty of room for her stuff. But not much else. Like, I've got to be honest with you, I find it hard not to be sad sometimes when I go in there and sit with her. And I just think, what does life amount to when you don't like being inside, but you are now confined to quarters? And we've been praying, and we always pray for her son and pray for different things. And the cats, we always pray for the cats that live down at Ultimo and that kind of stuff. And just recently, I felt a nudge in my spirit. I don't know whether it might have been preparing a sermon or something, but I felt to pray that God would open her eyes to see opportunities to serve and show love to the people around her. And that's the way I've been praying the last couple of times I've been there. And she's starting to brighten up, because a funny thing happens when you change the way you see. Suddenly there's a world of opportunity. You're not confined to your room anymore. You're resting in your room so that then you can go out and find opportunities to show love to people and be a blessing to them. And it can actually transform your experience of life. See, no matter where we are, no matter what our circumstances are, we can see like Jesus sees. And it changes everything. It kind of shifts the parameters of our reality. You see, the funny thing is, not funny, the strange thing, the peculiar thing is, when Jesus willingly allowed himself to be nailed to a cross, it changed what was considered to be most important. It shifted the orientation of human existence. Being human was no longer about simply surviving. It kind of has been for most of the time, but when Jesus allowed himself to be nailed on the cross, that shifted. Jesus changed the key of our understanding of what's most important. Power is no longer about who can muster the greatest brute force. In fact, brute force can now be understood to be an expression of insecurity, now that we see. True power, eternal power, is with those who stand with that which stands for eternity. That's where power really lies. That's where life really is. Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., prevailed against massive opposing forces without the use of violence, without the use of force. Even though they were both ultimately gunned down to their deaths, their ideas became victorious. Their purposes triumphed over those who would oppose them, because they stood with that which stands as eternally true. The way of respect and non-violence and grace and love and life. But it's not normal, is it? That's extraordinary, really. And Jesus prays for his followers because he knows that things are going to get tricky for them. And he says, while I've been with them, I've protected them. And it's interesting to think about that, because Jesus never carried any weapons at all. So what's the nature of the protection that Jesus offers his disciples? I remember 25 years ago when Joe and I went on a course, a couple of months, visiting slums in Delhi. And they were places that you shouldn't go unless you're going with somebody who knows their way around. They're quite dangerous. And we would walk around following these little women. They were health workers. They were well known and well respected in the community, and they protected us. And they never carried a weapon. They never had to say words to confront people. They protected us by their presence. We were with them. We were okay. There's a protection in that. And Jesus offers that protection while he's with his disciples He was respected. Even though there were people going, oh, what's going on with Jesus? He had enough of a following that he offered protection. But he says, I won't be with you always, and things will get tricky. The world hated me, and the world will certainly hate you also. The world does not accept Jesus' ways, and it doesn't accept Jesus' followers. Jesus makes this very plain in the Gospels. He says, if they've called the head of the house Beelzebul, how much more will they malign the members of his household? And without him around, physically, Jesus knew that things were going to get nasty, and history tells us that it surely did. And you've got to wonder, why did people hate Jesus so much? He was such a good guy, and he was kind and caring and healed and did good stuff, and his followers were good people. They, embraced the community and did good service and all this kind of stuff. And one of the reasons, I think, is because Jesus' death and resurrection changes the balance of power, and it disables coercive force as a controlling mechanism in society. And those who hold power intuitively know that the ways of Jesus undermine their hold, and they don't like it. And anyone who follows in that, well, they don't like that either. They will resist it with everything they have at their disposal. Those who have little power love the ways of Jesus because they've got nothing to lose, and they become empowered by Jesus. Those with lots of power over others, they're not so keen. And so Jesus says, if you follow me and know my ways, you'll begin to be different to everyone else. You know that saying, the truth, you'll know the truth and the truth will make you odd? No, it actually says the truth will make you free. But if you're free in a world that is not free, then you are odd. And you stand out and you look a bit different, and the world is suspicious of different, and we instinctually want to fit in, and all that kind of stuff comes into play, and the world can be less safe for those that don't fit in. But if your interest is in life in all its fullness, prepare to get used to being a bit odd. In fact, learn to wear it comfortably and with a certain amount of panache and style. I think that's where we do our best work, because Jesus sends us into the world to follow him and to see in the way that he sees, even while we are not of the world, and the world knows that. Go in that power, because God is our ultimate reality. The death and resurrection of Jesus shifts our understanding of that ultimate reality, of the nature of that power and how it works. It exposes the arbitrary violence of humanity that comes when our heart is set simply on survival, and points to the self-giving way of Jesus as the way of fullness of life. Jesus has made God manifest to us, and we have come to believe in what Jesus has revealed, and this makes us odd in the world that is hell-bent on survival. And as we make the choice for life in all its fullness, we follow Christ into the world, and it changes everything. Let's do that. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you that you never pulled your punches and you never held back the truth from us. You made it clear that just as your presence at the time when you walked on earth was a challenge to all those who held power, so would our presence, if we followed you, be challenging to the structures of our world. But Lord, we want to go forward, seeing as you see, not being of the world, but definitely being in it, and changing everything just by our presence, to the glory of your name. Amen.